right, well, why don't we launch into it? So, Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome. I'm Lisa Chapman with Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. This is our January 2025 version of our Legislative Action Committee. So glad you could join us today and chat about what we think is going to happen this new year and what happened at the end of last year. And we'll start off with some positivity. How about those Lions? Pretty amazing game, yeah. So something really exciting and positive for us all to focus on. We also had some wins, so we'll talk about those this call. And I am just so grateful for all of you to be here with us today. So why don't we get started? Next slide, please. So this is our mission, and we serve as an inclusive voice to improve systems and support folks so we leave no one behind, and collaborate with all of you across the state to have folks access housing and end homelessness. And we are so glad to have you join us in our mission. So next slide, please. So today we're going to have some great guest speakers from the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency, Erica Hooper and Cassie Smith. Eric Huffnagel, our CEO, will take us through some federal updates and kind of a little forecasting about what potentially can be expected with the new administration. I'm going to cover some state updates and talk about what happened and didn't happen in lame duck. And again, some things to look forward to and look for in the new legislative session that we're just starting now this year, and just a few updates from Micah, from our folks. And then we want to hear from you, things that you're seeing in your community or things that you are planning for 2025. So thanks for joining us. And without further ado, let's go to our guest speakers. I'm so sorry, there's a typo. Erica Hooper and Cassie Smith, who are homeless coordinators, they're going to talk about their Unite program, and they're from the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency. So please take it away.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cassie. So we wanted to touch base with you and give you some information about our Unite Michigan platform. It's part of a larger platform called Unite Us, which is a nationwide platform. And Unite Michigan is specific for Michigan. And you can go to the next slide, please. And next one. So this is an overview of Unite Michigan. What it is a closed loop referral system that allows us to be able to assist our veterans when they're experiencing homelessness or have other needs that they are looking for resources. And so as you can see, a lot of our top needs that are requested is pertaining to legal assistance, physical health, and housing and shelter. We do have our top 5 organizations that are referring and sending those referrals. And so you can see that here. And then we also have our top 5 receiving organizations. So we've been working hard to really build this platform to get additional resources on there, because it's only as good as many resources that are available on the platform. And so the more resources we have, the better we can serve our veterans. And the nice part about this, and you can go to the next slide. Oh, one more. One more. There you go. The nice part about this one is that, like I said, it's a closed loop referral system. And so it allows us to be able to ask the veteran what their needs are and then send those referrals to the actual resource. And so a lot of times the veteran gets very overwhelmed when they receive a whole list of resources, and 9 times out of 10, they're not going to follow through with calling those resources. They're going to be, you know, trying to figure out day to day, how are they going to survive the day? And so with the closed loop referral system, the resource will actually reach out to that veteran and assist them. And so it's also nice because once their information is captured within Unite Michigan, they can also go to that referral, and then that referral doesn't have to ask the same questions about what's going on, what's your information, which can be very traumatizing for the individual when they have to continue to repeat their story. especially if they have trauma or experiencing homelessness or have mental health concerns. Um, and so I'm going to pass it over to Erica, who's going to go a little bit more in depth on that.
Yeah, so this opportunity came to us. I'll just say this. So Erica Hoover, Mental Health Suicide Prevention Manager at MBAA. I've been around for about 7 years now. And so the thing that, I really wanted to make sure that it kind of hit home for everybody here is that this isn't just for veterans. This is for veterans because this is something that we're starting. If you're a nonprofit, you can be a part of this platform and use it for resources for free. You can also use it as like your own case management tool. A lot of you, I'm sure, already have one, but this is an opportunity to get all active, current, everybody that's accepting referrals, people that still have funding in their programs. Like as an organization, you have the ability to turn on and off referrals in this. So if you are one person and you don't have the funding or you're going on vacation or something like that, you can turn off referrals so people aren't sending you referrals while you're out. It'll also track all your data for you. And if for some reason, you know, in a few months or next year or in a few years that, this wasn't going to be the platform that Michigan was using anymore, that we weren't using anymore, all that data is still yours. So that's something that, we've had a lot of questions about. We want to make sure that that kind of hits home. It's just other states are using it, and they've used it in ways that, some folks, the Veteran Affairs Agency or their department or whatever they call it in their state, started these referrals because, let's be real, like a lot of our veteran service organizations and other folks, they don't have like the technology, the capacity to know who's local in their area, what organizations, who the points of contact are in every single county of 83 counties in the state of Michigan. So this gives an opportunity for, somebody calls me and they are in, the UP, this veteran is, I can look up resources in the UP and refer them to those resources local for them, and those resources will call that veteran, as long as they accept the referral and they're eligible. The thing is that you set up your organization in the Unite Michigan platform. You can get email notifications to let you know that you've gotten a referral, and that way you can be on top of it when somebody sends it in. So it's not something that you have to log into constantly all the time, unless it's something that you want to log into and look at and explore and send referrals and manage your own cases in that. It's just a really beautiful piece of technology. Every year in our veteran leadership summit that we have, all of our veteran service providers and folks, they want like a list of organizations that are available to them. And that's impossible to do that and have it accurate because it'll be outdated the next day. This is an opportunity for everybody to jump on board and actually have your organization, the things that you provide, eligibility standards, all of those things, build it in the platform and let it be. I see a question. Can anyone set up their agency or program? Yeah. So you have to have permission from your organization. If you're not if you're not part of the leadership or whatever, you have to get buy-in from your leadership, but you can sign in. Unite Michigan or Unite Us will actually have somebody, they'll reach out to you and they'll help you set up your organization in the platform and kind of give you a rundown of what it looks like. And like I said, other states like Georgia, North Carolina is kind of the gold standard right now. They are succeeding so greatly. And the reason that they've been able to be successful, honestly, is because they've had their homelessness providers jump online, and that has really built their systems up where more folks wanted to come on board so they could be, they could refer internally to each other, and that they could refer to, food and legal and all these other resources. So I think that this presentation I think it might be an older one, but that very first or like the second slide, there's actually our major referrals right now. We have over 300 providers right now, organizations that are on Unite Michigan. They are not all veteran specific. So there's food pantries, there are some county offices. So veteran service offices are online. So you can refer a veteran to that county veteran service officer and get a direct referral to them. And so that's the goal, is just to get as many as we can on board online. And that way we can close all these gaps that veterans and their family members are experiencing. And that's kind of like the gist of it without getting like super, super deep in the weeds. I know we don't have tons of time and we don't want to like overwhelm anybody. I personally have bought into this big time after being here for 7 years and seeing how things work in our space and in other spaces. Um, I think that it's something like it's a tool that if we can all jump on board and just put like 10 minutes of time into building your organization, it's really going to help veterans and other people that you're serving in your community. Did I miss anything else, Cassie?
No, looks like there's one more question though in the chat. Missed the
Um,
intro. Sorry to hear. Uh,
yeah, so there's actually, we haven't set it up yet, but there are some ways that some states have been able to set up like an assistance form. And that's our next step for it. So you could go to MVAA's website and somebody could click on it and request assistance. We already actually have something like that on our website. And so we just have to work on integrating what that looks like, where somebody could request assistance. And then kind of most of our referrals are vetted through our Michigan Veteran Resource Service Center, which is 24/7 resource service center, and they answer phone calls and they connect veterans to their benefits. They are on this. Our VSOs are on it, our veteran service officers. My team, mental health suicide prevention team, is on this. So if anybody needs a mental health or homelessness referral, our jobs are to make sure that they get connected to those local resources. And they have like a mini case manager to help them and make sure like forms are filled out and they get to the right resource. So um that's kind of the gist of it, and like a really short, like we're all back from vacation, we don't want to overwhelm you too hard with like the nitty gritty weeds and the details of it. But I really think like this program could be really big and work amazingly for anybody, but specifically for veteran service members and their families in Michigan. And we would love to see you all join it in some capacity or ask questions or get with us to see about next steps.
Thanks. Um, this was really great information. I do have a question because I know there's a lot of continuum of care coordinators on the call with us right now. So, and there's also a question in the chat. So this is eligible for all programs, not only veterans, is one question. And then the other question, like, how does this work with coordinated entry in the by name list and the other kind of structures that COCs already have in place?
So this would be a direct referral to other. So yes, first of all, anybody that's a nonprofit can join this for free. You don't have to be a veteran serving organization to be on this. And you can use it as your like a case management tool if you don't already have one. I understand it can be duplicative if you do have one, and I'm sure a lot of you do have it. The idea is that it's like a 211 built in, and right now for us it's for veterans, but the more people that jump on, like legal services, for example, are one of the, which is unusual. Unite Us tells us all the time, but legal services in Michigan are jumping on board of this like heavily right now. And those are some of the top referrals. And that isn't only veteran specific. And so if you are a nonprofit, like just, it doesn't hurt to set something up and look at it. If it's not for you, you're more than welcome to turn it off, but to be a resource for folks, and get those referrals and stop this. Here's a phone number, call these people. As far as how it works between, the COCs and their process, that would be something they would have to set up between each other, or, how they would accept that referral and how it would go through their own process. It may be duplicative and there may be something that we can work through, or that Unite Us could maybe brainstorm to make that work a little bit easier. But really, in my eyes, like we want to reduce the administrative burden on everybody, but specifically like the people that we're serving. That it gets to be really, really overwhelming for some folks. So this is an attempt to stop that, and to close those gaps.
Yeah, great, thank you. It's great information. So, two things. Is there a link that you can put in the chat where people can like look at it from your website? And then also, if they want to like email you guys further, could you put your email in the chat so that people can follow up with you and maybe have a one-on-one conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put my email in the
Great.
chat. And then we have a one pager we'll just send you that maybe
Oh,
you
yeah.
can send to the group, and it has like a QR code and has all kinds of stuff on it that you can, look at, whatever you're interested in looking at on it. So
Perfect. Thank you.
thank you all very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This is great information, and I'm excited to look at the tool. So thank you. All right. Now, yeah, they have a lot of slides which we will send to you. We will make those available as well, so you can look at those in more detail later. So now we will segue to Eric Hufnagel, our CEO, who will go through some federal updates and talk about what the landscape looks like. Eric.
Great. Thank you. Thanks again to Cassie and to Erica. And Erica, our apologies for referring to you as Erica Hooper and Erica Hooker. We know you're Erica Hoover. So our apologies for that one. Yeah, we've got a lot to cover here with respect to the federal updates. As I teased in the last month's presentation, that we would have some information helping us to understand kind of what's going to be happening in 2025 and beyond by reading the tea leaves. But I'm going to start off by giving an update with respect to the federal budget. If we can, next slide. Thank you. So Congress did finally come up with a deal for an extension. They didn't come up with the fiscal year 2025 budget. They kicked the can down the road yet again. And so on December 21st, there was a bill that's temporarily extending the federal government, and that passed pretty handily in both the House and the Senate. Nobody wants to be accused of shutting the government down during the holidays, so everybody jumped on board to extend it out until March 14th. There isn't a lot of time left then for them to have something more formal in place. That deadline is April, but something is in place yet again. So next slide, please. One of the things that this did do is give us an idea of what's going to be happening in the upcoming year. There's some foreshadowing here because there were some disagreements on how they were actually going to move forward with respect to the budget. Interestingly enough, President-elect Trump weighed in on things and said, hey, we want to have the debt ceiling increase, which is counterintuitive because that's not something that you would think that he or Republicans would want to do. But for some reason, he was pushing that. Speaker Johnson tried to come up with another package that would allow for suspension of the debt ceiling for a couple of years. Things didn't turn out as planned. The conservative Republicans were saying, hey, absolutely not. Debt ceiling needs to be in place. And beyond that, what we want to do is we want to limit, we can increase the debt to 1.5 trillion next year, but then we can initiate 2.5 trillion in spending cuts by using budget reconciliation, which is a mechanism that was created back in 1974. And I won't go into all of that and how that actually operates, but policy wonks will understand that. But in essence, it gives the Senate the ability to pass this legislation with a simple majority as opposed to the 60 votes that were needed for other types of legislation. So with that all said, it says they don't really know what they want within the Republican Party at this time. So this could be telling us that there's going to be some funky stuff happening going forward, that it's all not lockstep at this point. So next slide, please. So bumpy road ahead. Let's fast forward after that extension was put in place. Mike Johnson was reelected as Speaker of the House, and he made it by the hair of his chinny chin chin, 218 votes to 217 votes. There were two holdouts in the GOP who were not going to be voting for him until President-elect Donald Trump stepped in and said, hey, guys, work together. And so that gave Johnson enough votes. It also included a procedural change. If you recall, before there was a mechanism through procedures that made it very easy for the House members to put up the House Speaker for a vote again during the term. And now that has been removed, so it's more difficult. There need to be 9 GOP members as opposed to a smaller number who could be calling for that to be reconsidered. So that gives a little bit more security to Mike Johnson going forward. But again, he's only dealing with a very slim margin as far as a majority in the House. So if someone is ill and can't make it into to vote, or one person decides they want to gum up the works and not support a piece of legislation put forth by Republicans, then there's going to have to be some negotiating taking place. So that is a good thing with respect to trying to have some bipartisan work done. Next slide. So this is where we are going to be forecasting a little bit of what we anticipate is going to be happening under the Trump administration. I mentioned in the last meeting that as a member, state partner of the National Low Income Housing Coalition, we were invited to a regular convening of state partners where we did get an overview of things and some prognostication with respect to the upcoming years of the Trump administration. And so what I've done is borrowed, so these are lightly used slides, and I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. Don't be scared by the number of slides I go through. Most of them will be relatively quick, but I want to give you a good flavor of what we see happening and where this thinking is coming from. So just as a reminder, President-elect Donald Trump, he won the election with both the Electoral College and the popular vote. The Electoral College is a much larger margin than what the popular vote shows. And then just keep in mind that he did win with 49.8% of the popular vote, so did not have a majority of the popular vote to get reelected. And Republicans are viewing this, though, as a mandate. I think that's important to be thinking about. They see this as a mandate, even though it wasn't a majority in the popular vote. Next slide, please. So President-elect Donald Trump, during his campaign, talked about housing supply and a number of things that would affect housing supply. So number one, deporting millions of undocumented people. Talked about extending opportunity zone tax credits, which many of you may be familiar with as an incentive for development to take place, which a lot of people would say did not necessarily have the intended outcome or impact of boosting housing. Reduce regulation that prevents reduce regulations that are standing in the way of housing development, and opening federal lands for housing development. Okay, so that's what we heard during the campaign. Next slide. So let's look at his record as president from 2016 to 2020. He suspended and weakened fair housing laws, most of that through executive order, proposed deep cuts to housing investments. That was rebuffed by Congress, proposed higher rents and work requirements for HUD residents. That also was rejected by Congress in those first 4 years. He proposed allowing shelters to turn away homeless transgendered residents. That is kind of unfinished business. Proposed evicting mixed status immigrant households. That also is unfinished business. Proposed weakening housing first and homelessness projects. That was rejected also through Congress. And then he proposed creating government camps for homeless people. Yes, internment camps, folks. That was a thing for 4 years that was being talked about. That also was just unfinished business during that 4 years of his administration. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about Project 2025. If we look at what's included in that, it talks about weakening fair housing laws. It addresses deep cuts to housing investments and turning programs into block grants, which in essence is, hey, let's give a chunk of money to a state and let them decide how they're going to use the funds, as opposed to thinking in terms of being strategic and targeting how you would utilize dollars. Higher rents and work requirements for HUD residents. It talks about ending mixed status immigrant households, evicting mixed status immigrant households, ending housing first and homeless programs, kind of a biggie, folks, and then replacing career staff with political appointees. And that may be something new that folks haven't heard about before, but in essence, it's talking about something that his administration tried to implement back in 2016. I think they started right away in the first year, which in essence is trying to make it easier for federal employees to be terminated. And so what this refers to is a Schedule F, which would allow for a larger number of employees who are in senior levels within federal departments to be recategorized, moved into the Schedule F, which would basically take them out of civil service protection. In essence, what the outcome would be is you would have people recategorized. If you didn't feel that they were loyal to you and the administration, you'd be able to recategorize them and terminate them. So it's a way of weeding out some career employees at the federal level who may not be seen as loyal to the Trump administration, which is a very dangerous path to be taking, because what it can do is pull a lot of good people out of senior roles within the federal government, but it can also be a disincentive for people to consider joining the federal workforce. Next slide, please. Okay, so how's 2024 different than 2016? Well, the incoming administration knows how to navigate things. If you recall, in the first couple of years, he oversaw an administration that was kind of in chaos, didn't know what it was doing, was out of its depth. By the time it got around to the last 2 years, they had a better understanding of what was going on and how they could make things happen. So now they're hitting the ground running, so to speak, and we don't anticipate we're going to see that couple of years of muddled mess taking place. Fewer establishment Republicans are willing to serve in the administration. Fewer Republicans in Congress are there to push back on harmful proposals. You've seen a lot of transition since 2020 with respect to those folks who were characterized more as moderates in Congress. So again, not as much support there for pushing back on harmful proposals. And then Trump wants to fire career staff, which I talked about with respect to the Schedule F category and reclassifying. The Supreme Court put in place fewer guardrails to prevent unlawful behavior and open the door to criminalization of homelessness, if you remember the Grants Pass ruling. And then shifts in public opinion, especially around homelessness. So that environment is a little different than it was back then. So next slide, please. Okay, just very quickly, Senate results, just to remind everybody, the Republicans picked up 4 seats, and so they have a healthy lead with respect to Republicans versus Democrats in the Senate. Next slide, please. Just wanted to note that Senator McConnell was stepping down as leader, so there's a question as to who might be stepping in, and that will potentially affect how we see that body act. It's been relatively conservative. When I say that, I'm talking about it's more of a slow and steady and methodical body as opposed to the House, which may take action on things that are a little more aggressive and conservative in the Senate, meaning that they typically do not just take on new things very rapidly. They're more thoughtful and conservative in their approach to change that takes place. But that may change depending on who is leading the Republicans. Next slide, please. And the House, you can see that that's a relatively close split there. That is not accurate because there were still some, when the slide was created, there were still some votes that were not finalized time, but it's a very narrow margin. Next slide, please. Okay, so the agenda for 2025, this is what we've heard from the administration, the incoming administration so far. They're talking about deporting undocumented immigrants, talking about signing an executive order to eliminate birthright citizenship. They're ramping up oil production and rolling back environmental regulations. They want to reverse the current Biden administration policies on DEI, LGBTQ, and civil rights. They want to fire the DOJ and pardon James convictions. Want to reclassify federal career staff to be at will, which I mentioned, and impose tariffs on foreign-made goods. So those are things that we heard, at least initially, are on the agenda. Next slide, please. Oops, let's go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. So Congress, when you talk about their agenda for 2025, what's been discussed is extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, rolling back environmental investments in the Inflation Reduction Act, lifting the debt ceiling and negotiating for spending cuts. As I had referenced earlier, not just looking at increasing the debt ceiling, but then how do we slash and burn as part of a negotiation for that. Making changes to the Affordable Care Act and work requirements or funding cuts for SNAP Farm Bill benefit recipients. Next slide. So new members of Congress, just want to point out there are new senators, 11 new senators. Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan is one of those, as all of you should be aware. Next slide, please. New members of the House, just wanted to point out that Tom Barrett and McDonald Rivet from the Thumb area, who's taken over actually for a Democrat. Barrett has taken over, Republican has taken over for a Democrat, so that has changed the makeup in the House with respect to our delegation. I just wanted to point out those are a couple of people that we need to have conversations with. If any of you who are on this call do have connections with them, it would be helpful if you could let us know that, because we do want to make sure we engage with them. We have engaged with them during their roles in the Michigan legislature, but we want to be lining up some folks who may have some ins and or otherwise have some history with either of these individuals to kind of lay some groundwork for some ongoing work with them in the next couple of years. So please contact us if you do have that connection. Next slide, please. Okay, so it's a little out of order here, and I apologize for that. But let's talk about appropriation. The Trump administration is proposing deep cuts to HUD funding. Very scary, staggering numbers, 15 to 18% cuts to HUD. We know that that would be devastating. Eliminating housing vouchers for 160 to 250,000 households, zeroing out funding for construction, and eliminating the Interagency Council on Homelessness. These proposals have been rejected in the past, but led to a historic 35-day government shutdown in the past. We don't know whether or not there's a political will to fend those off in the upcoming 4 years or not. But Congress has to reach an agreement for annual spending. So it's not just about the White House. It is about Congress. So we do need to make sure we continue to work with our members of Congress. Next slide, please. Okay, so appropriations, where are things now? Congress is back in session. That is an old slide. We know that there's an extension that goes until March 12th. We know that there has to be additional work done there because the final spending bill needs to be done by the end of April, or we face mandatory across-the-board cuts or sequestration. Some of you have heard that word before, but that would mean automatic across-the-board cuts for all discretionary spending, non-military spending. So in essence, if you guys can't get your act together and you come up with a budget, what we're going to do is cut things, and everybody's gonna be feeling the pain for it. It's going to go across the board to all departments. Monies will be cut. So there's an incentive to get something in place by the end of April. Next slide, please. All right, so appropriations for next year. We're not talking about the current year, which is not done yet. We're talking about for next year, October 1st of 2026. There will be a debt ceiling debate still, as I referenced before. There's going to be a lot of conversation about the debt ceiling and trying to, on the Republican side, the conservatives will want to reduce the debt ceiling and get something or give up something as a result, which is increase some spending or decrease spending, but increase the overall debt ceiling. So kind of a shell game of adding more money, but then taking money away. 2026 funding fights ahead. So we're looking at HUD programming. We're looking at vouchers. We're looking at homeless assistance grants. We're looking at public housing capital and operating accounts, eviction protection grants, and tribal housing block grants, and competitive funding. Those are some very specific things that we're seeing will be in the crosshairs of the administration and potentially Congress. Next slide, please. Tax policy in 2017. Trump signed into law a new tax bill. It cut taxes for wealthy and corporations. It doubled the standard deduction and weakened demand for LIHTC as a result, leading to temporary increase of 12.5%. And then it established opportunity zones. Again, I mentioned that were not particularly effective based on most people who have an awareness of how they were implemented across the country. Ended up being kind of a boon for certain investors, but did not have the intended consequences of developing housing in the way that it was suggested. Next slide, please. Okay, housing supply. He signed an executive order establishing White House Council on eliminating barriers to housing development. He decried efforts to increase housing density and did not want to change the fundamental nature of communities. And he's called for zoning regulations as a killer, saying, hey, we got to get rid of regulations so more people will develop housing. His campaign call for opening federal lands, as I said, reducing regulations to encourage the development. Next slide, please. Homelessness and housing first. This is really important. I want to slow down and make sure everybody is paying attention to this. We've talked about this for a number of years. Hold on to your hats, folks, because this may be a bumpy ride for us. So President Trump is undermining solutions to homelessness. He replaced the ICH head last time around. The expectation is that he will be doing that again with somebody who does not believe in housing first. And we will see whether or not USIC will have an existence going forward if he's going to be attacking that directly and trying to eliminate it altogether. He's proposing a shift of HUD funding away from housing first. It's very important for us to be thinking about that. There was some legislation introduced in the last session that we've talked about that was of concern to us, which in effect would do that. It would be saying, hey, the big chunk of funding that we're giving out can't be used for housing first. It has to be used for programs that are not housing first. So we know that that is something that's being discussed and plans are being put in place to try to pursue that. He has proposed allowing shelter to discriminate against transgendered or unhoused people, and has proposed camps for unhoused people to earn the right to sleep indoors. I mean, that's language. That's not just making stuff up or kind of reading between the lines. Those are things that have been said directly, very explicitly. Next slide, please. I'm not going to continue going through this. It's basically kind of the same thing, but this is from his agenda for his new term. Next slide, please. And immigration, proposed to evict mixed status immigrant household and discourage access to housing benefits. So HUD's mixed status immigration household policy would put housing at risk for tens of thousands of households who fall under that, including 55,000 children. And there's a final public charge rule that's been published. Trump is calling for mass deportations of undocumented people. I'm kind of being redundant here, and I apologize. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. Based on what our time is, I want to make sure that we provide Lisa the ample time she needs. Tenant rights is something we haven't touched on before, but he's looking to increase rent on HUD households, triple the minimum rent for working households, and increase minimum rent for elderly and disabled families. Talking about allowing HUD to change rent policies without protections for renters and allowing work requirements. We know that in the past, we've seen work requirements being utilized for what are deemed welfare payments, and we know that that had a very adverse effect on people. There will be some very serious unintended consequences if indeed any or all of these things take action. But again, you need to have congressional action for a lot of this stuff, but the administration does have the ability to affect policy through the federal agencies and the appointees that are working within them. Next slide, please. And fair housing, he suspended or replaced the affirmative furthering housing rule, undermined the disparate impact rule, and he failed to bring major enforcement actions, investigations of fair housing violations. I think the last one is kind of important there to be thinking in terms of the fact that you may have some fair housing violations, but if you're undermining that by not pushing enforcement actions, what's the point of having fair housing legislation in place? He does have a lot of authority to influence fair housing through executive order and again through the departmental structure. And Congress, unfortunately, has shown less interest in it. So that may be an area that his administration moves forward without as much pushback from Congress as we would like. Next slide, please. Okay, fair housing, where things are, final rule currently being held at OMB. It's unclear whether or not it's going to be released. So in 2025, we need to be thinking in terms of defending against potential changes or rollbacks like that from the Trump administration that can be done through executive order or through the department structure. Next slide, please. Let's see. Let's move ahead. Let's go past this one. Okay, this is important for us to think in terms of all of those things we saw that are getting us all anxious and thinking the worst. But there are opportunities for us to be working together yet on both sides of the aisle. And it's important for us to be thinking about where those wins might be. And we have opportunities. A number of these bills you've heard about, we've talked about them in the past, but the Eviction Crisis Act, the Family Stability and Opportunity Vouchers Act, the Reforming Disaster Recovery Act, the Choice and Affordable Housing Act, the Yes in My Backyard Act, the Rural Housing Service Reform Act, the Native American Housing and Self-Determination Act reauthorization, and the Fair Housing Improvement Act. That's a pretty wide array of legislation that has been proposed. We're looking at the opportunity for those to be reintroduced in this next 2-year cycle. And we're hoping that we would have folks from both sides of the aisle getting together on these and we can work on these. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we've had all the gloom and doom. Again, a lot of things out there that we should be worried about, but let's stay positive, let's stay focused, let's think in terms of what we can do to address some of these things. And a lot of organizations are talking about different things that can be done. The Center on Budget and Policy, Public Policy, and the National Alliance to End Homelessness and the National Low Income Housing Coalition did have a presentation. And thank you to Lisa for attending that or participating in that and taking some notes. And I'm going to share some of the suggested tactics that they're putting forth to think in terms of how do we address those threats that are posed by the incoming administration. So this is kind of an obvious thing, but it's important for us to be thinking about the collaboration that we have to be pursuing and acting in unison. So the strength in numbers, if you will, by being focused and having similar targets, similar priorities, and messaging going forward. We need to think in terms of blocking the bad things from taking effect or delaying them for a later effect and give some time for opportunity to effect change. So it's kind of dragging things out to prevent them from happening so that perhaps in 4 years we don't have to deal with those things. The other thing is, how do we mitigate harm? We know there are going to be some actions that are taking place that we can't control, but how do we think in terms of what can we do to reduce the impact of what some of those negative policy changes may be? We have to think about that and anticipate it and be able to pursue some policies to counterbalance those. This is important for us as well. We need to start doing this now.
Eric, I think you're frozen. All right, I'm gonna take, I don't know if Eric's with us or he's, I'll take over from here. Sorry, Eric, if you're with us, you can jump in, but just, you know, working together really closely. We've done this before. We know how to advocate. We can organize and get together, look for opportunities. Those champions could be on either side of the aisle. Document what potential impacts there could be with decreased funding, or, you know, how is this going to impact people? How are the voucher decreases going to play out? So all of those are really key in trying to stop some of the harmful things from happening. It's never too early to start forming relationships. And, you know, advancing positive policies, fighting back on criminalization, rejecting punitive actions, and, you know, a potential for using ballot measures to invest in solutions that we want to see. It's not an easy road, but it's a different road than a legislative or congressional road. Max, I'm not really sure about Lisa McLean's, you know, stance, but it's definitely something that we can work on, you know, in the next couple of weeks and just figure out and try to, you know, meet with her, as well as some of the new people and some of our existing champions. So that's a great question. And if anyone has, you know, reach out to us if you're a constituent, and we can, you know, go together and loop together on some of those meetings. Next slide, please. All right, so go ahead. So just some of the, you know, continue to advocate for positive funding increases for HUD. You can go to the next one. You'll get these slides within the week. Start making those relationships even with existing congressional members, especially with new ones. Start making those introductions, sharing your stories, talking about how much housing is helpful, how services really help people to be stable, using social media to amplify your messages, and as well about the gaps that there are in the system and how we propose to change those things. Next slide. NLIC is hosting a policy forum. CEDAM and Micah are the Hill Day co-captains. So hopefully you are all signed up. If not, it's a great conference. They always have members of Congress come by. Please feel free to sign up, and we will be reaching out to you really shortly on getting together about our Hill Day activities. And you can just go in for Hill Day. You don't have to go to the forum. You can just sign up for Hill Day as well. Next slide. And now a couple quick state updates that we have, and we do want to reserve time to hear from you. So go ahead. Just wanted to cover the lame duck session that we had in the legislature. So how lame was it? Well, we're going to talk about some wins that we experienced and some woes. So one win that we did all collectively enjoy was that the source of income protections passed. It was passed by the Senate on the 11th, and then it was signed by the governor on the 30th. So it will become law probably at the end of March. It's 90 days after the end of the last legislative session because it did not get immediate effect. The Senate worked really hard and passed about 70 or more bills in the marathon session that they held. They pulled an all-nighter from the 19th to the 20th and worked really well. The House walked out on the 13th, Friday the 13th of December, and was not able to gain a quorum because the Republicans walked out. The Democrats did not have their full members there, so they could not hold session. So that was the end of the House session. A lot of things were not advanced, unfortunately, that were really close, such as the Fair Chance Access to Housing, the Homeless Bill of Rights, which was on the board on the 13th to vote, and then it was temporarily suspended, so it did not get a full vote, unfortunately. The manufactured housing package didn't make it. Rental fee transparency, or the junk fee bill, did not make it, nor did the eviction, ceiling, and expungement, among others. Interestingly enough, the House met for 55 days, the Senate for 69 last year. This was less than when it was a part-time legislature. So unfortunately, we kind of squandered the Democratic trifecta and all of the momentum that we had. And a Democratic trifecta has only happened once every 25 years since the 1890s, just to tell you some history. So we will have a split legislature this year, but in terms of making our voices heard, we definitely did that in the fall of last year. We held a rally. We had a housing homestretch campaign. It was the largest gathering, over 250 tenants and housing advocates since the 1980s. So thank you, all of you. Many of you were there with us. We really appreciate it. Next slide, please. So the legislative session, this 25 to 26, 2-year session, we have a split legislature. The Senate is the same amount of members. However, they only have a 1-seat majority. Because of McDonnell Rivette's going to Congress, her seat is up for a special election. Don't know when yet. It's up to the governor to call for it, and we'll see when that happens. It probably will not be for a couple months. The House has a 6-seat Republican advantage, and then there's also new leadership in the House. There's a new speaker and a new minority leader, so we will see what priorities those folks have. So it'll take some time to kind of suss out what their priorities are and what it looks like for this coming, at least for this year. We want to set the tone on the importance of housing and tenant protections. As you all may know, there was a 2% increase in homelessness across the state of Michigan throughout between 2022 and 2023. And then the point in time count last year, which is a one-night count, revealed across the country a rise in homelessness, unsheltered homelessness of 18%. So we have a lot of work to do. And this is something that we can all rally around. Housing should be a bipartisan issue. Everyone needs it and wants it. Next slide, please. Just some ways to advocate. This is the time now to start forming those relationships. We have a new legislative tracker tool that we will roll out. Some of you used it, but we have to update it for the new year. We will share that link with you and as soon as we get it on our website. We're holding an advocacy day. More about that in a moment. We also have the Coalition for Expanding Housing Access. It's a collaborative that we facilitate along with some of our state partners, and we meet every other on Thursdays. The first meeting is the 16th at 10 a.m. Email me if you want to join that. We would love to have you. And we are going to advocate for some of the legislation that didn't make it and others that we hope to have enacted into law in this session. You know, follow trusted news sources, some of our wonderful national partners, some of our news outlets here that you can trust. Sign up for those emails and keep up, you know, as well as MICA, LAC meetings, and our newsletters as well, social media. These are all great ways to keep up on what's going on. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that we sent a letter to the governor with some priorities for the campaign to end homelessness. We are going into budget appropriation time for the next year's budget starting in October. So these are some of the priorities, and you will be seeing a lot about advocating on those different appropriations committees early this winter. Next slide, please. Thanks, Lauren. We finalized our policy priorities. These are the 6 areas. I'm not going to go into it right now, but just know that a lot of support, the safety net for folks who might have a housing crisis, of course, expanding access to affordable housing for all income levels, systemic equity for folks, you know, diversifying our funding streams in the threat of some of these potential reductions, and empowering more advocacy and community-wide and personal engagement in legislative advocacy. So next slide, please. Just a few updates from us. You can go forward. We are holding a webinar, our free webinar this month on Monday, a week from today, from 1 to 2:30 on the criminalization of homelessness. And we'll be sharing our toolkit and some of the work that we've done in this area with all of you. Next slide, please. We had to change our date for our advocacy day. So those of you that saved the date of April 9th, please erase it. Hopefully you wrote it in pencil. It's now April 16th because the legislature was not going to be in session on April 9th. So that was a kind of a surprise to us. So this is a Wednesday, April 16th, pardon me. And you'll see lots more. Registration will be opening very shortly. Next slide, please. We also are having our Breakfast of Champions, and we'd love for you to nominate an advocacy champion along with the other champions that we honor. Registration will be coming up shortly, but we would love to have you nominate somebody that's done amazing work in your community. Next slide, please. And this is where you come in. Sorry, we are running short on time, but I'd love for you to either unmute or put something in the chat for something that's happening in your community or something that you are planning. Anybody? All right. Well, thanks for considering that, and thanks for sitting through all the information that we had. Sorry, it kind of went quickly, but you can always email any of us. We're available if you have any questions about legislation or the committee or work that we're doing and how you can join in. We'd love for you to reach out to us if there's any questions. We also, next slide, are available on social media. There's a lot of ways you can follow us. Our website is undergoing major renovations, so please, take a peek at it in the coming weeks. Thank you, everyone, for your participation on this, for some of you, Monday back to work. So we look forward to advocating with you this year and getting a lot more wins. So thank you, everyone, so much. We appreciate you, and we'll look forward to working with you in 2025. Take care, all.